everybody, welcome back to another I Care for Your Brain with board-certified neuropsychologist Dr. Karen Sullivan. Today's topic is how to resist a bad mood. Going on, having a perfectly fine day, and all of a sudden, just feels like you can't resist being overwhelmed, irritated, annoyed, and all of these things get in the way of having a high quality life that you feel really good about with good, solid relationships. A bad mood is a temporary emotional state where you feel what? Sad, annoyed, frustrated, unmotivated, and it has consequences. It makes it hard to concentrate, makes it hard to engage in things that are meaningful to you, and to be around other people. There are psychological effects of bad moods. We typically turn on ourselves a little bit and think, what is wrong with me? Everybody else seems to be okay in this situation, and I'm just sitting here kind of stewing in my own juices. How can I stay in a good place mentally? That's what we're going to talk about today. In a bad mood, here's the problem. Our sense of reality is actually kind of warped. We are seeing things in a more negative, threat-based way than they are in actuality. Most things are actually relatively neutral, and there's a balance of both good and bad, threatening and enticing, things that would actually promote us having a better quality of life if we could pursue them. The common triggers to a bad mood is if you are sleep deprived, forget it. Try to be in a consistently good mood when you are not well rested. Not going to happen. We can have very negative thoughts. We can be stressed. And of course, there's real world external things. I mean, just turn on the television these days and you'll find something to be in a bad mood about. The thing I want you to think about is the difference between a temporary bad mood and a chronic emotional mental health challenge. So the two things you can think through are frequency and severity. So if more often than not you are in a bad mood, you could actually be living with a mental health diagnosis that goes beyond just an occasional downtime that would really benefit from evidence-based treatment. So the two that come to mind are major depressive disorder. And I thought it would be helpful to just go through this criteria so you can already start to be thinking, is it actually a bad mood or could it be something more? So for MDD, as we call it, you have to have at least 5 or more of the following things for at least 2 weeks, with either one of these being depressed mood or a loss of interest or pleasure. So these are depressed mood most of the day, nearly every day. And what that means is feeling sad, having an emotional feeling of sadness, of hopelessness, of being empty within yourself, and that loss of interest. So the things that you've always liked, the people you've always liked, the activities you've always liked, do they just feel like they don't hold any interest or allure to you anymore? The additional symptoms, we need at least 3 of these, are significant weight loss or gain without trying. We need insomnia, so trouble sleeping, or hypersomnia, trouble sleeping too much, trouble actually getting out of bed. We can either feel kind of agitated or we can feel kind of slowed. Most of these things actually go in 2 different directions. Fatigue or loss of energy nearly every day, feeling of worthlessness or guilt to the point where it can actually be delusional, where you're actually taking on more responsibility for things than are justifiably yours. Difficulty concentrating. I see this so often as a neuropsychologist. People come in and they say, do I have ADD? Is this the beginning of dementia? It actually winds up being depression. And of course, recurrent thoughts of death, suicide, life not being worth it. All of those things strongly suggest major depressive disorder. They also have to cause you significant distress and impair you in some part of your life, social, work, personal. And it can't be because you're smoking too much pot. It can't be because you're drinking too much. It actually has to be due to major depressive disorder. The other one is anxiety. Very important to know, is this just a bad mood where everything seems threatening and scary, or could I actually have a clinical diagnosis? So this is when excessive worry or anxiety occurs for more days than not for at least 6 months. And again, you have to have that functional impact. So does it affect your work, your school, your social life? The core symptoms of many different anxiety disorders, and there's different subtypes, are excessive worry, just always feeling like the world is going to fall out from underneath you. All of the what ifs start to get very overwhelming. Feeling on edge or restless. This typically makes you feel very fatigued because worry is also a somatic state where you're holding on to a lot of muscle tension. Irritability, things like, again, falling asleep, difficulties, too much, too little, and just like before, has to cause you significant issue. So when you think of a bad mood, right? So we're out of the realm of clinical diagnoses. Let's get back to our topic of the bad mood. This is kind of a rolling in. Think of like a tide in the ocean. And what is this actual mood that can take us over? It is a wave of different biochemical states. It's neurotransmitters, it's hormones, it's the nutrients that we've eaten or didn't eat, it's environmental factors, it's the lighting, it's the social context, it's the totality of all these things and how much of a load they pose on us in our psyche and in our soul. So I think one of the keys to staying grounded when these tides come in and out is to try to work on recognizing your emotional patterns and working on staying grounded no matter what is going on around you. And I think we would all like that. The question is, well, what does psychology or science tell us we can actually do to bring that into our lives? So the first thing is actually recognizing your mood triggers, slowing down and not just going from stimulus to mood, actually finding that millisecond break in the middle where you can say, okay, I actually made an interpretation of something, or I'm feeling overwhelmed because too many things are stacking on one another. That's a really important part of modern day bad moods, is we're actually reaching beyond human capacity for what we can hold in any given moment. We're going to talk a little bit about digital world, digital detox in a minute. So think about slowing down. What is your interpretation of events? So what's the meaning you give them? What is the why you tell yourself about why things happen to you? Why people do the things they do to you? And very often it's in that millisecond interpretation that we actually have something called a cognitive distortion, which is how our past experiences shape the emotional responses that we have in the present day, which leads to our mood. So cognitive distortions are actually kind of irrational because we're not fully using the present circumstance to make our determination. We are exaggerating something in the environment. So a thought, a feeling, and typically it's the negative. It's the threat. It's the what could go wrong here. And this is very, very common in terms of all or nothing thinking. So if I fail this test, this means I'm a complete failure. If my boyfriend doesn't text me back within 5 minutes, it means he hates me. So as soon as we start to think in these very black or white ways, wow, that's a great sign to yourself that you're probably doing some kind of distortion. We can also overgeneralize very easy. So this is where we apply one negative experience to all situations. So something like, I always mess up. Nothing ever goes right for me. As soon as you start to hear yourself talking in ways that are absolute, that is a clear indication to yourself that you are in the land of cognitive distortions, because nothing in reality is really ever that extreme. Most things have some positive and some negative, and most is actually neutral. It's us that gives it the label of negative or positive. We also are really good at discounting the positive, aren't we? So, well, you know, they didn't really mean it. Someone does something nice for us. Well, they probably had an ulterior motive for wanting to do it. So pay attention to when you're doing things like catastrophizing, personalizing, mind reading, fortune telling. All of these things can be counteracted if you just slow down and recognize. So great tools for this are things like journaling, emotional tracking with mood apps. The essence of it is just self-awareness and not being as reactive. There's also physical things you can do to get out of a bad mood quickly. So exercise, with its release of endorphins, reduces stress hormones. The foods that we put in our body affect our brain chemistry. I think the most important thing here from a brain health, mood, gut, brain perspective is avoiding processed foods and making sure you're eating whole foods that actually have nutrients in them and enough fiber so they stick around in your gut long enough so you can break them down and absorb the nutrients. Sleep hygiene has a very big impact on emotional regulation, which is really what we're talking about here. How is it that the world can do all its worldly crazy things, but I can stay relatively steady and regulated. Also think about things like your posture. How do you hold your body? How are you actually sitting in space right now? Are you kind of all slumped over and kind of negative? Are you actually kind of opening up your heart a little bit and facing the world with a sense of confidence and competency, like I can handle this? You also can be investing in stress reduction techniques. Things that are very accessible to all of us are box breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, mindfulness, meditation, all of these things to make sure we're not getting swept up in a future threat and we are staying grounded in the present moment. Gratitude journaling is also really, really helpful. Even if you just think every night of 3 things you're grateful for, just kind of resets the mind's tendency to run with the negative, which happens when we get swept up in a bad mood. Social connection is really important here. So for some people, the lonelier and more isolated they are, the more other people start to feel like a threat, and the ambiguous things they do that affect us can very easily be seen in a negative light, a threatening light, and we accept it as truth. That's really the big message here, is that so much of a bad mood is that we do this automatic thinking where we label something in a negative way and believe that it is gospel, when really the truth is it's mostly actually neutral, and it's how we're labeling it. Doing things like acts of kindness for other people are a great way to snap out of a bad mood. Remember how good it feels to be part of a community, to be part of a place in time on this earth where we're actually trying to be nice and supportive of each other. Do your part to make the world a good place, and I think you will be in a better mood. Also, do not discount the impact of laughing. Things like stand-up comedy have actually helped me a lot get out of dark places. So go on TV and find somebody who makes you laugh and just give yourself a break for a half hour. Sit there and try to reset. You also might want to think about a digital detox. Excessive screen time is no good for the mood. It leads to overstimulation, and that gets us more in this kind of threat detection mind where we're trying to make decisions so quickly because information is coming at us so fast. If you set better boundaries with your phone, I promise you, you will be in a better mood and you will create time to do things in real life, in real relationships that will improve your mood. So think about building a mood boosting routine. So what are the daily habits that you can put into place in your everyday life where you're actually building in experiences that make you feel balanced and more realistic? So remember, anytime we go for the things are going too good, things are going too bad, that's probably a little bit distorted. Think about how we can actually stay in the zone of regulation. And if you have a hard time doing these things, there's no shame in finding a professional mental health specialist to help make these things more personal or help you stick with them in a consistent routine, which you might want to do, but somehow your habits just won't allow you to do it. That's where we can really help as mental health professionals. See you next time. Bye.